Hello, everyone. This is JD Calderon, and this is Indy Comics Explained. And today I have yet another fantastic guest for us all to experience. But before we get to him, let me just show these off. This is currently on Kickstarter. So if you want to help support the Oswald Chronicles and myself and the channel, all that good stuff, this is the book I'm producing. These are two books that are currently available, along with a chat book. So thank you so much. And without further ado, here's our guest, Jason Lenox.
How's it going, JD?
It's going well, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Just getting ready for Valentine's Day coming up in a couple days. Got a Kickstarter. You got your Kickstarter. Everyone is busy creating, promoting, and it's exciting because it's exciting to see all. There's always a weird thing when you build a Kickstarter, then you launch it, and then there's all the people that are doing theirs when you are. So it's kind of like being at camp together. So you kind of get excited to see everybody pushing at that same time. And then you get out of it, and then you kind of don't, at least I don't pay as much of attention to it when I'm out.
Right.
As if you're in it and you see all the people that are doing the stuff. So it's an exciting time for all of us right now doing our projects and hopefully having a better 21 than we did in 20, right?
True. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, 20 wasn't great, but it wasn't horrible for me either.
No,
So
good.
yeah,
Good.
So I mean, granted, I mean, yeah, it was a little weird like that. So, but yeah, that's how it worked out for me. It wasn't terrible. But yeah, it kind of worked out with all the books and everything. So
Yeah.
I mean, how many campaigns have you done so far?
This is my 11th.
This is your okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm on my 20th.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're like a senior user, man. That's great.
That's nuts, is what it is. And we're looking at probably another 5 more this year.
JD, what year did you do your first one? Like, how long have you been doing it?
To 2012, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, I did my first
2012.
one, I think, in either 2011 or 2012. So we were definitely early adopters in the system.
Yeah, because see, the thing is, I did the first one. It drove me nuts. Like I just hammered, and it took me another 2 years to do another one.
Hmm.
And then I did one more after that. And then it took me another year, and then I went from hardcovers. I just started doing floppies,
Hmm.
and I just started really doing a lot of those. So
Hmm.
now it's just standard comic books. We're gonna move back into trade paperback soon. But it's not about me, Jason. It's about you.
Right. Okay. I'm gonna answer questions, so I'm not gonna ask anything else.
All right. So I have a question that I ask everybody. I love
Yeah.
this question, right? Even though I think a lot of people ask it, but it's one of the questions I really enjoy because it's all right. We all have had our first comic, right? So we know what that first issue is, and we're like, oh, it was great. But there's another first for you
Hmm.
that we all experience as creators, and it's that first book that made us say, oh, yeah, this is what I want to do. What was that book for you?
Heavy Metal March '89.
Nice. Okay.
I remember I was reading Marvel books before that, and I had this awareness that heavy metal existed, like it was some kind of dangerous thing.
Right.
And I remember I caught a copy at a bookstore and like I kind of bought it on the sly and took it home like it was drugs. And that issue in particular had a feature story by Juan Jimenez, who I think is one of the best comic book artists ever. He passed away last year, unfortunately.
God rest his soul. Yeah.
Yeah, and he had a one shot in there that was kind of this sex comedy, science fiction, weird thing, and then all the backup stories were like really well done. And I remember reading that, and it was just like, whoa, like this is like another level of talent and another level of storytelling beyond kind of the Marvel DC churn of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember when I read that, that really kind of just was, it was like it was unlocking things in my head. I still remember the book, the cover. I still have that book. I can pull it out of a long box, but that book for me was like, whoa, that was like, we're going to turn some gears in your head when you're I would have been 14, I think, when it came out.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, yeah. I mean, because for me, there's always that pivotal book that does it for you. You know, for me, it's Frank Miller's Daredevil, 168. You know, when the lecture first introduced, that was that was the book that did it for me. I was like,
Yeah, and and around that time there was less books. It was like there was less TV shows. So I mean, like it's interesting how those seminal moments where it was like everyone kind of at least has some awareness over a certain age that like there was the Elektra Daredevil books, and I think not to sound like an old gatekeeper, but I think those books, because there was less, that they became more legendary. So they were more touchstones for comic book people, whereas they're, the good thing is that people such as ourselves can knock out books, but there's so much stuff now that I think it's hard to have those experiences that like you're describing, where everyone knew it. Like I still think of one of the biggest things was the Crisis books, the 86 Crisis, like that was like, oh my God, like Crisis, oh my God, they're going to do. And that, comic book people like, yeah, killed Supergirl, killed Flash, Anti-Monitor. Like it was an event, for people that read books.
That was it was an incredible series. But let's get on to let's talk about your process. Now you're the writer artist of your title, right?
So I created this book in 2016 with two writers. So those two, Dennis Fallon and Jason Palmatier, have done most of the writing. I bounced in and co-wrote a few things. I co-wrote a story in this with Jason that another artist that we brought on did. So I never really wrote until I got involved with Lords of the Cosmos as a creator, where I've actually, gotten more involved with editing and writing as well as doing art in the main storyline. So yeah, I've forced myself to stretch a little bit. Probably the most interesting stretch is being an editor and critiquing writing and critiquing art, but from an editorial standpoint of, and I never did that before. So it's kind of, you got to step your game up if you want to do that and not only be able to create, but to then constructively critique and be an editor. And that's a whole nother game to add. So it's been interesting to do that too.
That's cool. Now, when you're working with the your writers, are they giving you like full scripts, or are they giving you like Marvel style where it's a little, maybe a paragraph or two, like a description, you'll go off, you'll construct the story from there?
I'd say for the main story, it's been more Marvel, the old Marvel style, but for the scripts we've written for others, it's been more traditional script. Of on this panel, we want to see this and we want this line. So I guess I get more of a house rules. I get to play a little more fast and loose for my own stuff. As we try to be tighter for others.
Right.
So yeah, I guess that's a double standard. Oh well.
It happens. But I mean, but do you enjoy working the Marvel style?
I do. I do. I think there's a flexibility to it. Lords of the Cosmos was made in the most bizarre hodgepodge way where it was a stub idea I had in my head. And I actually at work ran into Jason at a job site. We were doing work at his house. I was doing construction management at the time. And I just started speaking with him as the homeowner. And he was telling me how he was in the Robotech and Transformers and he was writing, and his brother was a professional writer. And I said, you're local. I had this idea of what if we did like an 80s toy cartoon kind of comic. Would you want to work on that with me? Get, kind of your fresh local. And he said, I'd like that, but could we call my friend Dennis? He lives in LA. He does TV and movie stuff, and he really likes the 80s. Could you pitch it to him? So I pitched it to Dennis, and he said, I love it. I love your energy. I love that you're doing stuff. You're out doing shows. You're out creating stuff. Like, it's someone like you that drives this. And then we kind of started just putting together kind of who the characters were. Like, we were building toys. And then we just sat and made this document of like who all the characters were and what they did. And then I just took this book of like, this guy is this and this is what he does. And I said, we have to see what they look like. Right. And I did 7 like little group pinups for the villains and 6 for the heroes. And I said, well, here's 13 pinups, and we knew. Then we just said, "This is what they look like," and then we were like, "Well, now what?" And I just said, "I'll just start making pages," and I literally just started. I mean, it's not recommended. I think there's major. I just started doing pages to start having them do stuff.
Right.
And then they started saying, we're just making things in this completely organic, vomiting things up way. This is really not the best way to be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And then we started going back and like adding in pages, like scabbing wood together, where that process will take us through the end of issue 5. And then I want to start working off tighter scripts after 5.
Right.
So we've literally done that in probably the worst possible way. And when we started issue 1, we started having more ideas because Lords of the Cosmos was always just like a big explosion of a million little things doing stuff. And then it was like, we have this story and that story. And I said, I don't have enough hands and time to do all this stuff. So that's the very first issue is let's bring in other people. Let's get in different talent. Let's bring in our friends. And so we started, writing stories for other people to help flesh out the fact that the main story could only do so much. And I only had so much time. So we took what was a weakness on my part of like, okay, I can only do so much work to say, well, let's include others. And I think we benefited a lot from doing that. Now, again, we kind of stumbled into that, but by the 4th issue, the one we're doing now, that structure to the books has worked out great. Where like we're able to tell stories on top of stories that link back. So in the main story, there's a conflict between 3 of the characters where they're discussing things that they're aware of. And there's a little box like, see this story. Well, that story's in the books. Then you can go to that story and be like, oh, now I know why this guy wants to kill that guy. So we've gotten better than tying all the stuff together. So I'll be honest, like I said, we really kind of just built those first 4 issues, main stories in the loosest, kind of oddest way possible, just to introduce all these characters in their world. And then the side stories have branched out. Over time, we've tightened it up. We know where we're going to take it by the end of issue 5, and then it needs to be definitely more structured. But I think if you look at creative processes, and obviously you've done a lot, you've known a lot of people, that sometimes these things, they don't come like a set of blueprints where it's like, on this day we're going to start and here's the plan. It's just kind of, it's an organic thing that kind of grows, and sometimes you just got to roll with it, and sometimes you roll with it and you learn along the way, and then you process it out and see how it works. I wouldn't recommend what we did. I wouldn't say, it probably was a dumb way to do it. And it did cause some difficulties, but there was a lot of organic learning through that process. I'm glad we did. I just wouldn't recommend it to others because it was just very haphazard, but it's what worked, so you just roll with it.
Did you enjoy it?
I did. I did.
That's all that matters.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it, and there was a lot of just fun accidents that happened along the way. Like, one that sticks out to me was when we did all these character designs. One of the characters was kind of described like Groot, and it was before the Guardians film came out. And then the Guardians film came out, and I was like, well, this character design sounds just like Groot. Right. We were talking about it and agreed, like, yeah, boy, this really is not good because this character is Groot. And Dennis, I remember, said, we'll just have to cut him out of the book because that's a dumb idea to have a Groot clone when Groot's very popular. And I said, well, but why don't we have a plant character? And they're like, but what we have is Groot. And I said, let's go in a different direction so it's not Groot. And I drew a character that was like a snow globe with a flower in it, with like robotic legs and kind of like a mechanical gun arm, like, and a claw. Right. And I said, so here's a plant character that nobody will mistake for Groot. And they were like, okay, like, that's cool. We like that character, but we don't know much about it. And then for issue 3, Dennis had this amazing idea that this character represented a race of plants from a bygone era. And he wrote this whole crazy origin story for this plant to bring him into the present continuity. And then I fitted in 4 new pages to fit that character into the main story, right? Where he just kind of appears kind of like Tom Bombadil, right?
Right.
And then that character became like the feature of issue 3, this kind of weird character that was kind of a scrap heap. We didn't want it to be Groot, and it was a lot of fun, and it was really creative to build this whole thing. And then even on the editorial standpoint, the original artist we had brought on to do that was not capturing what we wanted. And then a young guy that I'd met named Zach Snyder, not the Justice League guy, but just a local kid down in Philly. He said to me at the first Keystone, he said, "I'd love to do something for one of your books." So I reached out, and then he designed these amazing creatures and stuff for this plant universe, and we were really happy with the whole process. And it was fun to discover that, but it all came from this weird plant machine hybrid that came from the fact that we didn't want to have a character that looked like Groot. So there was a lot of weird kind of organic things where it's kind of like, whose line is it anyway? Like, figure this out.
Right.
And we've gotten better at it, and we've done more. So I think the 4th issue is the most cohesive of the lot. If you looked at all 4, you can pick apart issue 1 and start saying there's a lot of things in it that probably could be improved. But like you said, did we have fun? Yeah. Is it the start of doing something better? Yeah. I mean, me personally, my biggest concern is, are you getting better? So if you're drawing or writing or whatever, it's like, is the newest thing you're doing the best? Because you would hope it would be. And I think we've learned a ton through doing Lords of the Cosmos, and we've gotten better. And I think that 5th issue will be better than the 4th one. And I think it is getting tighter because we understand it, you know, as a 3-headed monster of like owner creators. We've gotten better as working as a team, and we've gotten better at. I think we had 22 people work on this book.
Wow.
So it's a lot. It's a lot of people. So there was a lot of moving parts. Now some of them played small parts. So like every issue has a toy on the back, which you were the one that inspired me to do toys, right? And,
I'm sorry.
You were in my head for years. After I met you in 2013, I think I met you, and you always had toys in the back of my head. So every issue has a toy. So I met a guy that does little wooden and clay and metal sculptures, like one shots. He just does one for me. Do a lot. So, cool. We have a toy maker, and then we have a guy that photographs the toy. Then we have a guy that makes the toy packaging. So when you get these books, the back cover is a toy, and the inside back cover is like the back box of the toy with the powers and the strengths and the descriptions. So
that's cool.
So yeah, I think we had about 20 people on this current book. It contributed to some way or another,
That's awesome. Now, obviously, like I said, you've done a lot of Kickstarter. You've done 11. So how has the crowdfunding affected you and your ability to create your books? Like what are the positives that it's done for you? Because I mean, before, I asked this question because in the bygone era when I started in 91, 92, the only way to really get your books out was through the distributors. We had 13 of them. You released your books. You printed like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. You sent them out into the world. And then once the industry collapsed down and it was just diamond, it was harder to get back in there. Right. Then we moved and Daphne and I were just doing conventions, and then Kickstarter happened. So that's how like so I mean, what are you doing aside from Kickstarter to get your stuff out there? Are you doing anything else, working with any distributors?
So that's a great question. So, up until last March, the last in-person show that I did was in Pittsburgh the first weekend in March. And I haven't done one since. They've all been canceled. So, I'd been doing shows, about once a month since, the middle of 2012. So that was eight years of doing, a frequent amount of shows. Some people do more, some people do less. So the in-person, politics of let's shake hands, hug, and kiss your kid, like being a politician, like that's out, and I think that was completely unexpected, and that takes a huge part of, anyone that's doing what we're doing out, that you can't be at your local show or shows. So one of the things I did a lot in the last year was really get more focused and dialed into my Etsy store and working on building that audience. I had my best year ever on Etsy last year, experimenting with marketing, experimenting with paid ads, experimenting with specials. So that was something that I started dabbling with about 2 years prior. 2019 was okay. 2020 was pretty impressive. Ironically, this year it hasn't done much, but I have been putting my energy into Kickstarter, not into Etsy. So one of the things I've actually learned now is that I was wondering how much my Etsy performance was based on active marketing. And I'm learning now when I'm doing nothing's really happening on Etsy. So actually right now is almost like a science experiment of like, I'm going to put no effort into Etsy and just see how it does with nothing. And to be honest, it's not doing that well, which is, again, it's just, you learn that. So I put a lot of time into Etsy, and it's paid off. And you can build, you can slowly build a fan base on Etsy, sending individual thank you notes, putting the people in your database. We pulled a marketing quote from a guy that bought some of the books off of Kickstarter or from Etsy. And we use your quotes, because you wrote us, this guy wrote us this really awesome email that he was a fan for life and had some really cool comments. So that's key. I've used MailChimp for years now, JD. So, having a regular newsletter, having a regular, social media presence. In the last year, I got more involved on Instagram. I wasn't really messing around with that till late 2019. And then last year, I put more focus into it than I ever did. And I'll be honest, through this Kickstarter, I've put more effort than I ever have into doing podcasts and interviews. I don't think I've ever done it. And again, just saying, what can I do better? Because I can't physically get off my ass and go to a show for 3 days. Right. And I don't know, that may not come back for a long time yet. And even if it does come back, it may not be what it was. So, you need to get your internet kung fu, better, because guys like you and me may not be able to table for who knows? I mean, we don't know when that maybe. Could be 2023. You don't know. So to me, I've just tried to get all those things either working or working better. I mean, this has been my best Kickstarter by a mile. The most backers I ever had on one was 154, and we're at 187 right now. Right. The most money I ever raised on one was like 4750, and this one is over 6600, and there's still 10 days to go. So, I mean, I think there's a couple things going on there. I think one, you put in more years, you put in more effort, and you get more results. But I also think that there is an effect that a lot of these people that are, geeky comic book people, the money they were going to spend at XYZ, the show, they ain't going there. So JD has a book. All of a sudden, it's like, I can't, wow, JD's got a book. Like, I think we are more appealing now because they can't they may not even be able to go to their comic store. I don't know. So I think right now, the crowdfunding, Kickstarter, Indiegogo universe, I think we got a shot in the arm. And the reason I share this is this. So I work my regular job. I work in commercial and residential heating and cooling sales to contractors.
Right.
We had a record year last year. We made a ton of money. Like, it was lights out. One of my coworkers went to buy a swing set for his daughter because he couldn't go on vacation. And he went to the local company that sold swing sets, and they said it was the busiest they ever were. They had like a 6-week back order for swing sets.
Wow.
And then you start realizing, you talk to the ticket agent at the local baseball team, they're dead. So there's almost this feast and famine thing where, like, conventions are DOA, but Kickstarter's through the roof. Right. So I think, it could be that part of what's going on now with crowdfunding is at the expense of shows. And here's the thing, it is what it is. It's not a decision we made, but we can only play the cards that were dealt as a community. So I think right now, I'm glad that I had this book that I was working on last year, that it was ready to go now, because I think right now is prime time if you have things. Because, and here's the other thing too, guys like us are making our own IPs. And I've always, don't yell at me, world, but like, I've never had as much respect for people that are just doing fan art. And look, I have fan art. I like fan art. But when you just see people at the shows that are like, all I have is fan art, there's nothing there. Here's the thing: whether I like your book, whether I don't like your book, you got your book. Like, you have a JD property. It's yours. Like, it's your idea. For better or for worse, it's yours. So during these times, you can promote you versus the people that are just like, hey, I drew Black Panther because he had a big movie last year, and the year before that I drew Baby Groot. They're not bringing anything to the market except other people's IPs. And like, it's an easy way to make a nickel. It's like a cheat code. But to hump out your own book and say, I have an idea you never heard of, let me earn your respect. When you're doing that, you're playing on a harder level. Because you're not pimping out $1 billion property that everyone did the heavy lifting. So you can just say, hey, I drew the Mandalorian. Everyone's like, oh, I love that guy. Let me buy it. And look, I have fan art. I try to make less and less all the time. I would rather just make my own things or public domain things that no one owns. I enjoy doing that. So I think right now it's a great time to have a project, because in the absence of live action, it gives you I guess the word I would use is like a flag. Like, I have a flag, rally to my flag. And you can market you can market your book and you during these times when, like, if you're just relying on schlepping fan art, that worked when you could just go and just throw big wall prints up. But I don't think that's working right now. I really don't.
I don't think so either. I mean, I remember Daphne and I did a show out here in Long Island, and it was probably 2018. And we had a table, we had all our books out, and a friend of ours comes over, Mark, and he's like, JD, you and Daphne are the only ones just selling comics. And I was like, what? I was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, you're the only ones just selling comics. And I was like, really? He was like, yeah. So I got out from behind my table, started walking down the artist alley. Everybody was just prints. Maybe they had one comic, maybe, if you were lucky. Everything else was just prints, all the way through. Prints. It was crazy, And I remember back in the day where it was just all comics.
I don't remember the artist's name. I'd have to look. I think I bookmarked it, and it was a fairly well-known guy that had done a lot of quality work. So shame on me, I can't remember the person's name. But he wrote an editorial or blog or whatever it was, and he said, I can't wrap my head around the fact that I've done 200-page books, right? And with legitimate characters and everything else. And I asked people for $25, I guess copies or whatever. And people are like horse trading with them, like, $25, And then he said, but yet you could have a pinup from that book, right? From that book, you blow it up to 11 by 17, and they'll pay $20 for it all day and all night. And he said, I can't understand that. This makes no sense. And his only theory, because first of all, he's right. Right. Yeah. But you're sitting there. His theory was that, do people, the common man and woman, do they think that a print is in some way like that'll be worth money like a painting? Because in their subconscious, they know that the Met in New York City has paintings that are worth $1 million.
Right.
So in some way, do they think they're getting rich if they buy a print versus a book? And then his other theory was they could see it. So you could buy it, put it on your wall and see it, whereas a book is on a shelf.
Right.
I love shelves of books, but maybe that's just me. So it is interesting what you're saying. And I think a lot of it is driven, unfortunately, by the raw math. Like, if you look at automation in stores, the more that you see people pushing for a higher minimum wage, then you see things where it's like, well, these businesses want to automate more, because it's like, if you're going to make me pay a higher minimum wage, then I will try to not hire people to keep my profit margins up, because that's what they want to do. So it's like, if we can make a machine that does your job, why would we pay you? And I think, to your point, if you look at the labor to make these books versus a print, the labor goes way down. And then to this article that I'm referring to, it's like the margins go way up. So it's almost like the fans and the economics have pushed people to say, look, I'm only here for the money. I don't care. I think people like you and people like me, we dig comics. And it isn't necessarily about, is this the most money I can make? Because let's be real. I mean, in an era with shows, if you took your time and effort that you did doing the Oswald book and you just said, hey, what's popular? And again, you can make a list, Black Panther, Baby Groot, whatever.
Right.
You just said, hey, we're going to have a wall o prints. You probably make more short-term money. And I think for a lot of people, that's hard to turn down. For me, it's not, because I don't care. And I think you're the same way. Like you actually, like, you have a passion in your heart to tell your story because you're a creator. And I think to the layman, they're all artists. But if you actually can read what's going on in that show you're referring to, you and Daphne could have been the only creators there. Because if I went up to you guys and said, hey guys, tell me about your ideas, you guys would talk for hours about all your ideas. But I think for a lot of these folks, if you said, well, what are your ideas? They'd be like, well, people really like, what do they like now? They like this guy from the show. You said, no. What are your ideas? Like, I know that, you know, fill in the blank is popular. You know, right now everyone likes WandaVision. Like that right now is the flavor, you know, everyone WandaVision. And look, I don't begrudge people for watching a show, but it's like, well, I get it. I get the big company has a popular show. What's your idea? What's your crazy idea that you got in your head? I know that you two do. Right. But I think a lot of these people, they're just kind of there doing whatever it is to make a nickel. They're not really creative. And they might, oh, well, we are. Not really. You don't tell me an idea you got. I don't think they have them. So I think, oddly, it's an exciting time for creators now, because those guys doing the schlep fan art prints, they really can't push that so much on the Etsy's because they'll get hit by the IP lawyers.
Right. I mean, and the thing is like, you know, going into that, like Daphne and I, we did a show up in Boston, right? And, you know, we would always be surrounded by the print people. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? And it was always, you know, they have Spider-Man or whoever they have, right? So what I did was I have dozens and dozens of images of Oswald, of covers, pinups, all kinds of stuff, right? So I made them into 11 by 17 prints. You know, I made them all the prints, and I hung them behind me like a giant. I did what they did, but it was just all Oswald, right? And it was hilarious to watch. People walk by, and they're looking at it. They're like, "Wow, do I know this?" Because they're so accustomed to walking by stuff they know, right? That when they saw these prints, they were confused because they were like, why doesn't he have Deadpool? Where's Deadpool? Where's Spider-Man? You know?
So I'll give the fans a little bit of a knock, and I hate to say this, but people like patterns. They like things they know. They like things that are familiar. And people are a lot like the old Pavlov's dog story, where we teach you to know something, you do it. And South Park hit it a couple years ago. They had the Member Berries episode where there was.
I haven't watched it in years. So
they got these berries that were like, remember AT-AT walkers, and everyone's like, we love those. And all they did was they kept saying, remember that, and they were lampooning the fact that pop culture has morphed into this thing of, oh, I remember that. Oh, I remember this, where it's like all these remakes and stuff where it's like, here's the Terminator 6, and you know, does he say I'll be back? Because I remember he says I'll be back, and then he says this, and it's morphed into a lot of actors now where it's like, oh, he looks like the guy that played this character in that film. He looks like, and I'm like, God, if you were I mean, I love the old De Niro 70s films where it was like, no, De Niro made those damn. It wasn't like, oh, Robert De Niro looks like the guy from the 40s. So if he wore the same outfit, we think it's him. Where it's like, oh, okay, great. So now you're basically just aping everybody else. And it's very depressing to me. But I think what you noticed was they don't give a shit, excuse my language, if your art's good or bad. It's like, well, is there a
Right.
pattern? Is it,
Mm-hmm.
do I know a pattern? Because the pattern makes me feel comfortable in trying to understand something new. It's like they're not looking at the quality of the art or the craftsmanship and the ideas. It's they want the member berries. They want to see things they know. And look, I'm as guilty of it as anybody else. I still keep my fan art. Now, a lot of my fan art's weird, like RoboCop. I have the
Yeah, I love
fly.
RoboCop.
So I try to keep my fan art really weird. And a lot of where I've been going with fan art is public domain stuff. So like my newest fan art, you're gonna laugh about this. And it's on pause right now because I have no time with the Kickstarter. I'm doing a 34 by 34 inch poster of Machiavelli's The Prince.
Okay.
So my fan art is Pope Alexander VI, Caterina Sforza, the King of France from that time. I can't think of his name, and Cesare Borgia.
Right. Wow.
Right. And part of the fun for me with that, because that's at the point where my fan art is a 600-year-old book, is that I started reading about the angry politics of the time. I actually had no idea what weapons they used. I wasn't. It was a weird era where they used guns and swords and knights, and they still use castles. And for the last 2 months, because this thing's huge, it's this big stupid project, I've immersed myself in watching the Borgias on Netflix. I've immersed myself in learning about the crazy goings on in Italy. So like to me, it's kind of a fun way to just like kind of time travel. So it's fan art, but like when I do fan art, I try to just take it to either just weird ass places where it's like, let's go look at all the 15th century literature fan art, and it's Jason. So to me that's fun. If you're gonna do fan art, do it that way. The stuff where it's like, let's do WandaVision, it's like
yeah. But I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens, because one of the things Daphne and I noticed, going to shows, is that what we were encountering were people who were not so much fans of comic books, but fans of, like, the Marvel movies, right? So
the media.
Right. So they would see Captain America, and they were just like that. They didn't want to read about Captain America. They just wanted to see Captain America. For them, that was enough. They could look at him, oh, that's Captain America, right? The thing you were saying about pattern, right? And it's just really, really crazy. And it was just like, and that's one of the things that we've encountered is like, I'm sure you've been there. You go to a show and you see, Bill Shatner's there, right? We all love Bill Shatner, but I consider Bill Shatner a show killer for me. I go to a show with Bill Shatner's there, I don't do well. I know Bill is doing well.
Yeah, he sucks all the money out of the room.
Right.
Here's the thing. I remember going to comic book shows in South Central Pennsylvania when I was a teenager at like the Holiday Inn in York. And I remember just going over with my cousin, and you'd go, and it was in a room, $5 to get in. The only creator I ever remember seeing at these like little one-day fun day shows was Joe Monks, the fellow that was the writer on the original Cry for Dawn. I remember he was just like, "Hey, I have a book. You should buy it." And he was like the only. It wasn't like he was, and I was like, "Oh, there's an actual person here that made these." And the only other things that were there were toy dealers and the guys with the long box and the wall books.
Right.
And I would go to these shows in York with a list of, I want to get these, I want to get Avengers this and stuff. And I would just, sort through and look for deals in the long boxes. And like those were shows. There was no autographs. There, like Joe Monks. And he was just kind of like, "I have a book, sir." And it was like, how novel. This man is actually at this flea market, horse trading show that wrote a book. Huh. I mean, it was like seeing like a ghost, like, look at that. So I think even what shows have morphed. But if you think about the years I'm talking about, 91, 92, 93, 1990, there was no, no real internet. There was no, we want our newest Marvel film. So it's changed radically from what it was. And to your point, you and Daphne aren't wrong. Like, these people, they like the celebrity culture.
Mm-hmm.
They like these big movies, and they like, to my point, they like the pattern recognition of knowing that they know this.
Right.
Like, Black Panther to me was weird because he's a character that's been around for decades,
Mm-hmm.
and he's been there. He's been a member of the Avengers and doing stuff in the background. I never heard anyone except like a couple like hardcore comic book people ever mention Black Panther has a movie. Everyone cares about Black Panther. I remember being at a show in Ohio when that was at its peak, and there was people, do you have Killmonger prints? And I'm like, who? And look, no,
Like,
it is
what?
not a knock on those characters, but I'm like, y'all never asked for this stuff. Like, where was the person 6 years ago saying, I like Black Panther?
Right.
I mean, I'm sure they existed. I mean, they had to, but you never had anyone saying, do you have Killmonger? And you're like, or was there a creator was there a guy 5 years before that saying, hey, I really love Black Panther. I got all the characters because I just like the book.
Right.
I never saw anyone doing it.
No.
I mean, was there? I don't know. But I mean, but all of a sudden, boom, there's $1 billion in marketing. Now everyone's a fan. My kids have their little electric toothbrushes. One has Chewbacca, one has Black Panther. And I grabbed the wrong toothbrush. My youngster goes, Daddy, I'm Black Panther. I'm not Chewbacca. That's my brother. Don't you pay? I'm like, okay, I know you're Black Panther. He's Chewbacca. And look, and this isn't to knock any of that stuff, but it's just, there's a big muscle behind those things with dollars, and people are they're cresting on it because they're more just into making money, I think, than being a creator. And it's kind of a bummer because the people that are doing what you're doing and I'm doing should be at the top of the food chain, but it's bizarre because these people that do less work and have no of their own ideas, they're rewarded handsomely. And I think it's frustrating to actual creators because you're kind of like,
but it, like you said earlier, it's cycling over to Kickstarter and Indiegogo where they don't have that reach.
They can't play there because you can't just you could not roll on those and say, hey, Baby Groot, that won't play. So this is actually very interesting because you and I can still play because we have our own ideas. Again, whether people like them or not, but you could say this is my idea and find your own audience. But if you don't have that and you're relying on someone else's nickel, this is actually, it's interesting because I guess this has been in the back of my mind, but until we just started talking about this now, it didn't really quite occur to me what was going on. So this is actually, like, I feel like I'm discovering this is a good interview, right? But it's like that is a change because like now maybe the people that were a little lower on the benefit food chain are like, oh, well, now we can still play and you may not. And those people, the print machine people, they may be out of luck for a long time because even if shows do come back, I mean, they could be depopulated, and it could be maybe people don't have the money to spend. It's hard to say. Some people have done well, some people have done horrible in this economy. So that fan base that was the show fan base, with their financial profile, who they are, they're not the population.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, have those fans been more adversely affected than, people in their 50s? Like, I have no idea, but it could be the disposable income pin print comic book people. Maybe they did well. Maybe they got crushed collectively. And that you turn around to shows and it's like this show's destroyed. Does it even, do a lot of these shows even come back?
Yeah.
What shows do come back? What is the format? Is it going to be, you can have a show, but we're only going to let 150 people in at a time, JD? And you're like, well, there's nobody here. I can't, I can't. So the biggest thing, so even my regular jobs, doing commercial sales, there's servicing existing accounts, there's cold calling, there's all that. And as I talk to my peer group of guys that are doing this every day, I've told them, I'm like, the best thing you can do right now is get your kung fu better on the phone, texting, internet, email. Zoom calls.
Mhm.
I've gotten real good at doing PowerPoint presentations on Zoom. I text with my customers way more than I ever did because it's an easy way to gab with these guys if I have their cell phone
Mhm.
numbers because I don't want to be around them in person.
Right.
You know,
Yep.
so I've had to step my game up at my regular job because going to see these dudes at job sites, you really don't want to do that now for
Mhm.
your own safety. So it's like, well, how can I still hustle if I can't do half of what I used to do? So it's like, get better at Zoom, get better at PowerPoint, I started telling my true story. I never used MailChimp at my regular job. I took about 2 weeks last summer and took all my customers' emails and I made a separate work MailChimp. And I told
Mhm.
my buddies at work, I was like, your territories, you might want to, what the hell are you talking about? I'm like, I've been doing this for years. My art business to talk to these people. We can track who opens them and we can see what they're clicking on. Well,
Mhm.
you're really doing that? I'm like, guys, we're stuck. We can't get out,
Mhm.
you know? So to go back to your big question, what are you doing now? I'm just trying to step up every ability I have that isn't around me, that isn't me around people,
Right.
you know? And it's a challenge. I mean, it's like fighting with one arm tied behind your back, and it's like now fight and you're used to having this and now you just got that. And it's
Uh, if even.
if even, I mean, you may have nothing and you're just dancing around hoping you don't get hit in the face. So,
Mhm.
it's definitely a challenge. Yeah, a
Mhm.
big answer to one question. I like this.
That's all right. That's all right. That's cool. I'm gonna ask you one more question, then we're gonna move on to some other stuff. But hold on. Um, for your first campaign, what was like your biggest takeaway? Like, what was the biggest lesson you learned from that first campaign?
My very first Kickstarter.
Hmm.
Let me think for a minute. The importance of prep,
Okay.
because with that Kickstarter, having no experience, I just launched it and I was like, "Hey, I have a thing," um, and it funded. It was
Hmm.
supposed to raise $1,000 and it made 1,100.
Okay.
Um, but at that time, it was like a cold start where it was like I didn't have the database or the people, and I was
Hmm.
just kind of like I have a thing. Um, in retrospect, one of the big differences with this Kickstarter is that you do them enough, you get smarter, and then the technology changes. So the biggest shift from 1 to 11, the pre-launch link,
Hmm.
have that for a month and be like, hey, sign up, get my book day one when it comes out, where you go and you kind of limp it through that first one where it's like you're just hoping some people give you some money. And like I remember calling, hey, could you give some money to the kid? Why can't I just send you a check? Well, if I don't hit this number, I get no money. What?
Right.
And that first Kickstarter, I had a bunch of people just sending me, well, here, I'll just send you a check.
Uh,
Uh, whereas now I'm like, don't do that. I'm like, use Kickstarter. But so, I mean, prep. But I didn't,
mhm.
I mean, again, at the time and what I was doing, I did the best I could do.
Right.
But yeah, there was no prep. It was just like, I got this. And,
Hmm.
and I stumbled through to the goal. I was smart enough to set a goal low enough that I could hit it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Good
You
for
know,
you. Good on you. That
I,
you.
I again, where I've seen people occasionally where it's like they've done no Kickstarters, they don't back any, they don't seem
Hmm.
to have a presence, and they'll say I have a $50,000 goal.
Yeah. I've
And
seen.
it's like, yeah, you're not going to get $1,000. Yeah, you can call
Maybe.
grandma, call your neighbors, you'll scrape it
Hmm.
up. But these bigger numbers, I don't think people understand how hard to get 10, 20, $30,000. It's like, this isn't a joke. It's
Right.
very difficult. So yeah, no prep. It was just,
Mm.
hey, and it worked because I kind of lucked into a appropriate goal,
Right.
and I stumbled into a win, but no prep at all.
Yeah. Well, when I did my first one, I put up for 5K, and I had my web comic with Oswald in it, and I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, we can do this." I had I don't know, it was like 3 or 4 thousand people coming in on a regular basis to check it out, and I said we could do this, and it was 30 days of grinding to make it up to like, I think we got it, came out of like 52, maybe 5,300, but it was 30 days of grinding. I was like, oh man, I was just every day just sending out like messages and, email bombs and all, everything. It was just like, ugh. I was like, and then, like I said, after I was traumatized, I couldn't do another for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
2 years. And I was like, okay, then I did another one, and that was another grind. And I was like, all right, I'm taking it easy. I set my goals at $500, and I'm like, okay, we'll go from there. Less stress. I don't want to stress in life.
Yeah, this book's goal was the same that every Lord's has been $4,000. This one funded in 5 days.
Nice. That's
So,
awesome.
so this was kind of like, okay, cool. So now it's like, and this one, the biggest problem on this one was it funded so quick. I was like, well, I had no plans for stretch goals because the last one was like $4,400, and I was like, probably do the same thing.
Right.
So I was like, oh, and true story, I was like, we'll make a stretch goal for 5,000. My guy that's been doing my graphics, Ariel, it took me and him a day or two to talk, and then it was like I'm like, well, fuck, we already missed that. Like we got to push it back because I can't say, hey, you already hit it, but here was the goal. Like I'm like that does, so what did I learn this time? Maybe prepare for success better. I mean, because I didn't, so I've had to hustle my ass on the fly to put together stretch goals. It isn't hard, but I wish I'd have had it played. But again, no one knows everything, and this stuff, it changes. So I mean, like, from my biggest problem was no prep to this one, I didn't prepare for success based on my goals. So I mean, that's how this one I would critique this one. That okay, now you've gotten past the no prep to why didn't you have your stretch goals like already planned? Well, oops.
Yeah, definitely. I hear you. I'm the same way. I was like, oh, I'll raise $500, and I get up to 2,000, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do now? So the only good thing is in the past is I usually have a backlog of stories that I've already written, and they were in prose, and I would just do those as PDFs and just say, here you go. All right, here's a PDF. So that was easy enough to do. Now I'm doing stickers, so that should be fun. So
yeah.
All right. So we've been at this for a minute. We're coming close to the end, but we're not there just yet.
Okay.
Right? So I got a few more questions. Now I can ask all my goofy questions.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the first one is, and like I said, these are two questions I ask everybody.
Mm-hmm.
If you had the choice of any artist, living or dead, don't worry about budget, to do a cover for you, for your book, who would you get?
Katsushiro Otomo, the guy that did Akira.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, he, for two reasons. Every cover he ever did was amazing on Akira, and I always think about him with this. I mean, he draws really cool stuff. He could draw rubble and make it look awesome. Rubble.
Right.
Who makes rubble? He made rubble look cool.
Cool. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah. I have those books.
Yeah, so he would be my pick if I could just say anyone. Katsushiro Otomo.
Nice. Okay. Cool. I haven't heard that one. That's a new one. Then the next one is, right, Jason, if you got the golden ticket and they called you up to the big companies, right, and they said, any character, any team, who would you want to work on? And it doesn't have to just be Marvel or DC. It could be any, it was like Judge Dredd or whatever. Who would you want? What would you want to do?
I think he stole my thunder. I think I probably would pick Judge Dredd. I think Judge Dredd's awesome. I was thinking about Judge Dredd. I'm like, yeah, no, I was actually on a podcast this morning with a guy in London, England, and I had to take a minute just to say I'd never done a podcast with anyone in England, and I was like, I love Judge Dredd. I have like the first 13 years, and he's like year 1, year 2, year 3.
Right.
I think Dredd's great. Yeah, I think if I could pick anything, it would be Dredd because Dredd's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll pick Dredd.
That's cool. Now I have some comparatives for you.
Okay.
Right? So, they're just comparatives. You'll see it. Now I'll softball you first, and then we'll work you onto some of the harder ones.
Okay. Wow.
All right. Captain America or Batman?
Batman.
Okay. Oh, and some of these will come with Y. All right.
Okay.
So Godzilla or Gamera?
Gamera is the turtle that spins around, right?
Yeah, that's the turtle.
I think I'd pick Godzilla just because I think he's more iconic.
Okay.
Gamera never really turned me on as a kid. Godzilla, I remember really enjoying when it was a dude in a suit.
Mm-hmm. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. John Byrne or George Perez?
George Perez, hands down.
Okay. Fair enough. Um, Harry Potter or Narnia?
They're both about the same to me. I'm not really into either of them, but I like the Narnia movie better than the Harry Potters, even though there was only like one or maybe two. But there's a big fight with a bunch of animals and minotaurs and stuff that I still remember. The Harry Potter films just they all seem like some really bad Scooby-Doo films to me. I don't know. I'm probably gonna get beaten to death by a bunch of people with magic wands, but the whole Harry Potter thing, it never turned me on. They just seem like really like the movies all seem like really dumb, repetitious Scooby-Doo stuff, and the whole Snape character, I could never. It was like he's bad, but even though he's bad, he was really good. I was like, what? It just didn't care for it. I'd pick Narnia.
All right, cool. Secret Wars or Crisis on Infinite Earth?
Crisis, hands down.
Okay. Clive Barker or Stephen King?
Wow. I think Stephen King has some really amazing stories, but I think he's got some real clunkers out there too. Clive Barker maybe doesn't have as high a hit, but I think he's got some more extreme ones. But I'll be honest, I probably reference God.
So you're a horror guy.
Well, no, I'm thinking of because I'll be honest, I think if I'm being honest with myself, I'd have to go Clive Barker.
Right.
Yeah, I'd have to go Clive.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I'm a huge Clive Barker fan.
Yeah.
It's funny, like their trajectories as far as writers. Like, it's funny because like I remember when Barker was first coming out, Stephen King came out and he says, listen, this guy is the future of horror. And then he did some horror stuff. He did Books of Blood. He did a couple other things. And then he started doing like this weird fantasy stuff like a Magica and Weave World.
Yeah,
those things.
Dude. I remember those Books of Blood, and you wanted that vicious shit in those books, and then like you said, then he kind of got in this kind of weird.
Right.
I remember a Magica, The Great and Secret Show, and I remember the books were just boring. And it's like it's kind of like, dude, when you were doing Midnight Meat Train, Hellbound Heart, that's the shit that turns people on. Excuse my language, but then like you said, he was kind of doing these weird. It's like when a heavy metal band, starts making like ballads, and you're like, dude, rock out, man. People will say Slayer always sounded the same. Hey, man, it worked. We weren't going to see Slayer. We were going to see Slayer because they thrashed. We didn't want to go we didn't want to hear him do a Cinderella song. Do what works. So I'm with you. I think Clive definitely. You hit it, man. I forgot he did all those things. Weave World.
Yep.
But you know what everyone loves? The Cenobites. They love Hellraiser.
This is true. This is true. Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers?
Well, okay. So as much as I'm equally a fan of King and Barker, it's interesting those kind of mass slasher things. To me, they're all kind of equally generic. I suppose if I had to pick one, I'd pick Jason over Michael.
All right.
But kind of equally disinterested in both.
Okay. So here we'll try. We'll step to the side on horror. Pinhead or Freddy Krueger?
Pinhead, hands down.
Oh, okay. Why?
I thought Pinhead was definitely more interesting. I thought the whole Cenobites thing was it took BDSM, it took bondage culture, and it took it to another level. It played with the archetypal heaven, hell, what was going on, and that what were they really there for? It was like, we want to give you an extreme experience, and maybe what you think is an extreme experience is like, we'll take it to a level like, that will just blow you apart because you can't figure it out. I think the Cenobites have stuck with us in pop culture because they work. Freddy, I know a lot of people that like him. I always thought he was more like comedy. And also it was like he kind of got morphed into a hero, but it was like he was killing kids, and it was like it didn't. And look, he's a pop culture phenomenon like any of these things, but like, just for me personally, Pinhead, just, I don't know. I will watch. I will still sit. I just, for Christmas, I just got the "I'm in Hell, Help Me" shirt, and my older son's like, "Daddy, that shirt, that's a really mean thing to say." I'm like, "It's from a movie, son. It's okay. We can watch them." I was like, "No, he's not watching those Hellraiser movies. Stop." So yeah, I'm going Pinhead. Easy on that one. These are good. Good. I like. This is fun.
Oh yeah, I got a bunch of these. All right, I'll ask you 2 or 3 more, and then we'll wrap it up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Bernie Wrightson or Barry Windsor Smith?
Bernie.
Okay, fair enough. I'll give you another hard one. Walking Dead or Dawn of the Dead?
Dawn of the Dead, hands down. I don't like Walking Dead. Here's the thing. I have a letter published in issue 4 of The Walking Dead. I wrote a letter and they printed it.
Nice. But you're not a fan.
Well, I liked the first 6 issues with the original artist, and then he left, and I didn't like the person that replaced him. And I remember the TV show I thought was like a bad soap opera. I watched the first season. I didn't really like it. I tried to watch the second season, and I kept falling asleep. And then doing shows, I'll be honest, I grew to hate their fans. I really, really got sick of their fans. They all reminded me of soap opera fans with their, "If Daryl dies, we riot. I love him." And I just kind of grew this animosity towards Walking Dead fans. And like, I know if I have Walking Dead fans that are my fans and you see this, don't kill me, but I really got sick of their fans. And that's really petty and personal, but I grew to, I grew to dislike Game of Thrones fans. True story. And when the show apparently tanked at the end, seeing them all grow to hate it, I was like, you were annoying. Yeah, this show great. And then they all were like, so those are my 2 least favorite fandoms. They just grew to great on me.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
I don't know how familiar you are with these 2 artists, but I'm hoping.
Okay.
Tim Vigil or Richard Corbin?
Richard Corbin, hands down. And Tim Vigil's a powerhouse.
Oh yeah, Tim Vigil's incredible.
His pen and ink work is bananas. He kind of reminds me of Wrightson. But Richard Corbin, man, he almost has that like old masters, like that. Like you'd see at the Met, like, here's a nude woman on a we painted in 1300. Like there's this raw physicality to his work that is that, and Tim Vigil kicks ass. So this was like, they're both really good.
Yeah.
But I would go Corbin in this case.
All right, we're gonna wrap it up with this one.
Okay.
Stan Lee or Jack Kirby?
Jack Kirby all day, hands down.
Okay. Now why? Why would you choose Stan over Jack?
So I have
Jack.
I have a deep reason on that. Is so these are 2 guys that were in the legendary connection doing these classic Marvels. So on the first glance, it's like they did it together, and their career divorced. Kirby went out of his way to make his own stuff. He made Darkseid. He made the New Gods. He was a creator. Now I think the sad thing with Kirby is that in his era, of course, every one of us can blab as much as we want, right? No matter how big or small we are on a million platforms. It seemed to me that Kirby was like, go in an office and shut the hell up. And like like you know what I mean? Like he was like this legend of the game, but we had in that era it was like go in your room and work. And like who really knows how much Kirby thought, because he hated Stan and he did that like funky sham man. Even for him to blast this guy that you could tell he didn't like, it was like, I don't like you, JD, so I'll go in this book and I'll make a character that's kind of like you, and then people have to infer. Whereas today, he would go on Twitter and say, this guy's a POS. And he'd have been on every website being interviewed, two legendary creators.
Right.
So to me, I look at Kirby and I'm like, damn, this guy he was a creator. And when he was on his own, he was doing this. Now, in the same token, Stan Lee has been, a bazillion, he was granted $1 million a year from Marvel is just kind of like being the head of state. And so Stan Lee up until he passed away, he had the means to make any comic he wanted, because he could have gotten any artist, any creative team, and he had the finances. And I read a really wild article about Stan Lee in Vulture, like a 24-page article, and I sucked it up.
Right.
And what I gathered from it kind of put together bits and pieces that I was aware of. I was like, wait, Stan Lee had all these years where he could have done whatever he wanted. And he was doing like Stripperella and like these kind of weird things, like, hey, here's the most popular teen artist in Japan. I'll make a comic book out of them because Kodansha will publish it. They're probably giving him a lot of money. And it almost seemed to me that when he had the freedom to do whatever he wanted, it was like he wasn't really making good stuff. And then then I started to think more and more, did he really ride Kirby's coattails all those years and kind of stumbled into the greatest situation of all time? And what it really cemented for me was, I remember being at Wizard World Philadelphia in 2015, and I remember there was a big broadcast announcement that Stan Lee's Cologne was coming out. And I remember thinking, Cologne, where I was like, and I remember saying to a friend, I was like, this guy isn't a name. He's a legend. Like there's like Frazetta, Kirby, Lee's with him, right? He's in that stratified era. And I'm like, why is a legend selling cologne? Like legends need to act like he should be making more transcendent material. He's a writer. He's not a NFL lineman where his body. And it just seemed to me that I'm like, was all the talent really Kirby? Because what did Kirby do on his own versus what did Stan Lee do on his own? And Stan Lee was involved with a ton of litigation and weird money stuff. And again, who knows? I wasn't there. But it really seemed to me that, in my personal opinion, Kirby was the dude. He was the dude. And I think Stan Lee was there. And I think Stan Lee added some secret sauce to the whole mix, maybe the dialogue and stuff. But Kirby passed much before Stan, and it seemed that he really downplayed Kirby, like he's not here. And Kirby was in that no media era where it's very rare to hear the man speak. Apparently, you hit a nerve with me, because my opinion is that I really think Kirby was the big dog. And I think Stan was kind of the guy that was there, and he was lucky enough to be the guy that was out front talking, and he turned the narrative. I'll never forget, I had a person say to me their favorite comic book artist was Stan Lee. And then I was at Michael's, and there was a Stan Lee art book for comics. Now, when they had How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, it was like Stan Lee and John Buscema. In 2013 or 14, it was Stan Lee draws comics. And it was just like, he's really altered this narrative around himself, where it's like, he's not an artist, he's a writer. Where it's like, but he's a name. So if I had to pick every day, because I think Kirby was the talent. That's my opinion. What's your take on that? I'm just curious. You've had to pick one of them.
If I would pick Kirby as well.
Okay.
For similar reasons. Think about it. Stanley went off to do things like Stripperella, and he's done a bunch of other things, But when left to his own druthers, what did Kirby do? He went off into the fourth world over at DC, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
he did something like Captain Victory, and he did Silver Star, and he was trying to discover all these different mythoses. Whereas Stanley was obviously a great salesman. He was great with dialogue, and he was obviously great motivating these guys. And I think that's probably his biggest talent, where he was great at motivating his artists. Where he got in their ear and he'd be like, "All right, let's do this. Boom, boom, let's talk." And he could motivate that brain to get them going. You understand? So, like I said, he had his own talents, he had his own skills, obviously. You understand? And he obviously helped out in many, many ways. But his talent may not have been as, I think, because for me, I was never a fan of his writing. So, it's a little weird. It's just like, because I come in right after Stanley.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Stanley, like I'm right where just as a kid coming in Stanley. So as I'm hitting Roy Thomas,
Mm-hmm.
I'm hitting Marv Wolfman, I'm
Chris
hitting
Claremont.
Chris Claremont, I'm hitting JMD Mateus, I'm hitting those guys. You understand? Jim Starlin. You understand? And I forgot his name. He's the guy who created Micronauts or who worked on Micronauts. So, but created Rocket Raccoon. But that's where I came in. And then when I got to read some of the older stuff, I wasn't that big of a fan of it. Just like early on, I wasn't a big fan of Jack Kirby. It took me a while to learn to really appreciate Jack Kirby. That's the thing. I didn't appreciate it when I was a kid, but as I grew older, I started looking at his stuff and you're like, oh, that's what that guy was doing. You understand? And I really got to appreciate it when I saw his raw pencils. When I got to see a show and I got to see an exhibit and you just see his pencils live raw, and that was awesome to see.
I put on the Beatles for my kids, and my younger son is 6, and he goes, "I hate this," and I said, "Son, this is the Beatles." And he goes, "The Beatles." He goes, "The Beatles are trash," and I was just like, "Oh, brother!" I'm like, "Man, when you're 6, you just have no." He has no taste.
Filters. No
He has
filters.
no taste. He's no taste. He has no filters. And I called my one friend that collects Beatles stuff, and he said, "Punch your son." He goes, "Punch." I'm like, "Well, he's 6," but I was like, I thought you'd want to know that the young critic says the Beatles are trash. Like that's his hot take. The Beatles are trash. So I get what you're saying that Kirby is maybe a little bit more than the younger fan can even comprehend just how good he is, because you're maybe when you're younger the Beatles are trash and you have no taste. It's comparative, but it's interesting that you kind of have a very similar like even mindset. And look, I think on a positive note, I think Stanley, I think his real talent was being a bullhorn, the Marvel bullpen. He was like you said, the marketer, the promoter, and everything else. How good was he of a writer? I question it, because I think maybe it was Kirby. I think Ditko was maybe but he was the bullpen. He was like Marvel the brand, maybe not so much actually doing the lifting, but
I mean, like you said though, we weren't there, so we don't know.
Well, 100%. I mean, and it's like with bands, a huge Iron Maiden fan, and it's weird. Like Adrian Smith left the band; he was the rhythm guitarist, and they made some albums without him and without Bruce Dickinson, and then they came back, and a lot of people that liked Iron Maiden said it was really Adrian. When he left the band, it really hurt him. It's like, yeah, he's just rhythm guitar, but it's like, yeah, but we don't know what he was doing in the writing creative process. Like he's in there, and we don't know because we're not working with Iron Maiden. So I mean, like, was Stanley the secret sauce that made Kirby and Ditko? It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
You can't really unravel it all these years later. But yeah, no, I'm in camp Kirby. This is great. This is almost like a big political, like in comics, that's about as political. That's are you a Democrat or Republican? Well, I'm a staunch Democrat, sir. Well, I'm a staunch conservative. I can't support your position. But that would be an interesting roundtable to get a Kirby side and a Stan Lee side. Have you ever read that Vulture article? If you haven't, I'll send it to you.
No, I haven't. Yeah, send that over to me. I'll be interested in reading that.
Yeah, no, it came out a few years before he passed away, and it was. It's not a brutal article. The guy did a good job because he just lays out facts, and you can just read it, and you can draw. He's like Stanley did this, Stanley did that, Kirby did. You can read it, and you can draw your own conclusion. I'll send it to you. You should read it.
Yeah, definitely send that over, man. I definitely want to read that.
For sure.
Right. Jason, we made it to the end. We made it. So,
yes.
Yes. Before we go, please let everybody know where they can find you, your work,
okay,
Kickstarter, everything.
So, my main website is just Jason Lenox with one N Lenox.com. My Kickstarter is pinned to the top right side of the main page. Facebook, I'm Jason Lenox Illustrator on Facebook. If you're feeling really frisky, you can find my personal page and friend me because I like to put up stupid memes and my mood of the day picture. On Instagram and Twitter, I'm at Lenox Artist, and the Kickstarter is pinned to the Twitter, and it's the million post on Instagram, so it's always near the top. And then my Etsy store is Lenox Art Emporium, easy to find. And the Kickstarter is just Lords of the Cosmos 4 on a Kickstarter. If you find my website, if you find my Instagram, if you find my Twitter, you find my Facebook, you'll find it. So that's how to find me online. Easy.
Right.
Boom.
There you go. All right. So thank you so much, everybody. Please hit like. Please hit subscribe. Go check out the Oswald Chronicles on Kickstarter as well.
Love it.
You know, and
we're Oswald Chronicles.
Yes. You know, and Lords of the Cosmos. We got to talk about that. Yes.
Yes.
You know, yes. So thank you so much. I'll be talking to you all soon. Have a good night.
Take care. Thanks.
Thank you.